That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Jennifer Priest. Jennifer Priest. I am the ghost of high school past. Imagine some virtual chains. We will take you on a tour of the dawn of your high school. The story begins, like all Dickens' tales, with a young boy. This young boy is Paul Wasserman. Paul Wasserman wrote many books in his life. One of the last, The Best of Times, his autobiography. In this, he tells the story of two creations. The creation of the I School here at Maryland, and the creation of Paul Wasserman as a man. We next meet Paul at the age of 21 on his gap year experience, going to France. Many people today, on their trips to France, would take a jet airliner, but 71 years ago there were no jet airliners. Paul Wasserman took a ship. He took this ship. This is the actual ship that he took. He left from England on December 24th, Christmas Eve. You can't make this up. This is a picture of the ship today. The ship is at the bottom of the English Channel. The hole in the side was made by a torpedo. A torpedo from a German U-boat. It was December 24th, 1944. And he was on the way to France to liberate the continent. I'll read to you from a section of his book in which he describes the end of the experience, his rescue. Suddenly, small boats came into sight. I mustered the last of my strength to stay afloat. As boats drew near, terror-struck men tried to climb aboard. Again, the frantic fighting and clawing ensued. I saw a man get chopped up by a boat propeller. For the second time since immersion in the water, I decided to stay clear of the melee. But then my energy level had diminished significantly. It was only through sheer determination that I managed to keep my head above water. The boat drew near. I tried to reach up but lacked the strength. A sailor on board saw me. The boat's spotlight lit the water all around me. A sudden swell carried me right up the boat's side. A strong arm reached out and firmly grasped my hand. With the next swell, I was yanked out of the water and heaved over the shoulder of a Coast Guardsman. I landed flat on my face. The last thing I remember is the smiling face of a big sailor who said, "Welcome aboard, soldier, and Merry Christmas." And then I passed out. Paul Wasserman went on to do many things. He became a librarian. He went to study at the University of Michigan. On his first day of the PhD program, he turned in his dissertation. He then taught for them for a year as an adjunct lecturer and received his PhD in library science. You might have heard them called the greatest generation. Perhaps this is actually so. Paul was not the only member of this school to be in Europe for World War II. Dr. Hans Welisch was born there. He didn't come here with a PhD as Paul Wasserman did. Hans Welisch came here without a bachelor's degree. He is the only graduate from among the 6,525 graduates of this school that does not have a bachelor's degree. But he has a master's degree in library science. He has a PhD in library science. He is one of 6 graduates of the University of Maryland to teach on the faculty of the I School here at Maryland. He's world renowned for his knowledge of classification. The exact same classification that caused him on November 9th, 1938, the day following the day that's often taken as marking the start of the Holocaust, to get identified as Jewish and transported to the German concentration camp at Dachau. We're immensely fortunate that he later left there and went to Sweden. He later left there and went to Israel. He later left there and came to the United States without a bachelor's degree, I'll note, because his studies had been interrupted by a gap year experience. The greatest generation, indeed. This is from the wall at Dachau. It says never again in 5 languages. It does not say what will happen never again. It doesn't say whether it will never happen again in Darfur, whether it will never happen again in Rwanda, whether it will never happen again in Bosnia. It also does not say whether never again the classification systems that we build, the information that we collect, the information systems that we build will be used for good or for evil. These are our choices. iSchools are at the intersection of people, information, and technology. Technology is neither good nor evil. Information is neither good nor evil. That is up to the 6,525 graduates of this program. Our third hero is Claude Walston, who is with us today. Claude Walston came to what was then the School of Library and Information Services on loan from IBM, the same company that had made the data processing equipment that was used to process the census in Germany. He created here at the iSchool the first course in data processing, believing that if we were to use this for good, we must understand, master, and control it. He stayed here only a year because his nation called. When he returned to IBM, he went 5 miles from here to the Goddard Space Flight Center, which is at the center of this connection. This diagram shows the most complex communication system ever built. And on July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, Claude Walston was standing in front of the computer controlling the communication system that allowed us to hear their first words, Houston Tranquility Base. The Eagle has landed. Claude Walston returned to the iSchool and became our dean. Now, that's not the end of the story. At some point in this story, having heard that word Houston spoken by Neil Armstrong, thanks to Claude, at the age of 12, on a small black and white television set in Kansas City, Missouri. 5 years later, I went to university in Houston. When I graduated from that university, I answered the call of my nation, time of Cold War, and I went to look for submarines. The same kind of submarines that had sunk Paul Wasserman's ship. Why not, knowing that? How very odd that this many years later, we would have these two connections. But there are actually three connections, because just shortly before I received tenure, I received an award from the National Science Foundation to construct an archive of the memories of the survivors of the Holocaust. And we did this project jointly with IBM. And with a Holocaust survivor himself, Fred Jelinek, who had invented the speech recognition technology that we used. It has been a real honor for me to have the chance to follow in the footsteps of these fine men. Now, Jenny mentioned that I have a particular interest in mentoring. Just the other day, Carrie Krause, Carrie's here someplace? Carrie, would you stand up? Carrie said to me, was he the one who taught 6 courses your first year here voluntarily without extra pay so that you could teach 4 and work on your research? Referring to Claude Walston. Claude, would you stand up? Carrie, let me introduce you. Thank you both. It is an unbroken, that moment when that sailor reached in and pulled Paul Wasserman from the sea to today, and it continues. Now I know that some of the PhD students in the audience are a little intimidated by Paul Wasserman graduating in 1 year. I'd like to next introduce Jimmy Lynn, who did not quite manage to do that. Jimmy did not hear Neil Armstrong say that word Houston because Jimmy was not born for 10 years after he said it. So he went to a school in Massachusetts instead, to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. There it took him 7 years to finish his PhD. Okay, so don't feel so bad. Might feel a little bad. That was 7 years after graduating from high school. Ladies and gentlemen, the ghost of high school president, Jimmy Lynn.
What a tough act to follow, especially with that introduction. For those of you who know me, this is my costume. So. All right, so let me start you off with this scene from The Graduate. This is the scene in which Mr. McGuire pulls aside a very young Dustin Hoffman and tries to explain to him, what the next big thing is, right? And what did Mr. McGuire say? He said, one word, big data. Yes, he actually said plastics. But I decided that a substitute was in order. And unfortunately, big data really isn't one word. So I removed the space and made it one. Okay. So let's talk about big data. Whenever we talk about a problem, it's nice to sort of start to circumscribe the scope of the problem. So here I have gathered what are essentially organizations bragging about how much information and data they hold. So, a petabyte here, 10 here, 100 over here, and we just get a sense of the amount of sheer data that we're drowning in. Now, whenever I put up this slide, I always like to also put up a picture of this guy. Anybody recognize who he is? That's a young Billy G, who remarked that 640K, lots of people But don't laugh, though, because in about, less than 10 years, where's my cell phone? Can I borrow a cell phone? In about 10 years, this will hold a petabyte, and we'll be looking at this slide and saying, only 10 petabytes? How quaint. So I went off for a couple of years after myself when I received tenure on sabbatical and worked in the real world, building big data systems at Twitter. So if you look at the, from the 30,000 foot view, this is the picture of the Twitter architecture. On the top here is the site that you interact with. These are the web servers you would interact with when you tweet, when you followed somebody, when you retweet it, et cetera, et cetera. In the middle part of that cloud, where it says Hadoop, is the part I worked on. So that's the Hadoop data warehouse. Now what it does is it makes a big, giant sucking sound. What it does is it sucks all the information from your front end, the information, the layer at the top there, and that's holding a record of everything that you tweet, everything that you retweet, every follow that you make, and matter of fact, every tweet that you actually look at. So I got there in 2010. This is what the Hadoop data warehouse looked like. It was around 60 nodes. By the time I left in 2002 and returned to the university, it had grown to tens of thousands of machines across multiple data centers, holding tens of petabytes and ingesting 100 terabytes daily. Now, the next thing you ask is, what do you do with all that data? So let me let you in on a secret here. So this is basically how all consumer internet companies work today. They start off with a useful service. They get people using it, thereby having a record of their behavior, and so they then analyze user behavior to extract insights. From that, we transfer insights into actions, thereby completing a loop, creating an even more useful service, thereby generating more usage, more behavioral logs to analyze, thereby improving the service even more, so on and so forth. All right? So that's, and hopefully you make money somewhere in there, but lots of companies still haven't quite figured this out yet. All right. So let's run through a couple exercises. So before we get there, today we call what's on the right there data science, so generation of insights, and transformation of the insights into action is what we refer to as data products. All right, so let's run through a couple exercises. This cycle certainly describes Google, right? They provide a useful search service. You do a lot of searching. They analyze logs, figure out what you're searching, and make it better, right? It describes Facebook and Twitter, right? They analyze who you're friends with, who you're chatting with, make the experience more engaging, and force you, or encourage you to tweet more, post more, like more, retweet more, favorite more, etc. It also describes Amazon, right? It watches what you buy, and then recommends things that you don't really need. You buy them, and completes the cycle. And finally, it also describes companies that you wouldn't imagine, like Uber, right? Uber provides a useful service and analyzes where people are requesting these rides, and actually proactively sends cars to where they, the rides are going to be requested, thereby improving the service and completing this task completing the cycle. Okay, so how do we actually accomplish this? Well, it actually occurs in data centers. So this is a data center from the outside. Here's what the data center looks like on the inside. And colloquially, we refer to these as clouds. Now this brings me to my next question. Does anybody recognize this guy? Tom Watson, very good. All right, so Tom Watson was a CEO chairman of IBM from the teens to, I believe, the 1950s. And so he had this famous quote. He said, I think there is a world market for about 5 computers. And you know what? I think he was right. He was just referring to clouds, right? In a couple of years, we'll just have the Amazon cloud, the Google cloud, the Microsoft cloud, and that's it. Okay. Now, I want to start wrapping up here by telling you what we're doing in the iSchool in terms of big data. So I'll talk about 2 things. So as a matter of fact, right now, I'm teaching a course, INST 766, on big data infrastructure, where we're teaching students about technologies like Hadoop and technologies like Spark. So the assignment due next week is they are going to write a MapReduce program that builds an inverted index at scale. And this is the same type of inverted index that's used by web searching communities. The assignment after that is they're going to implement a PageRank algorithm, which, as many of you know, is sort of the algorithm that underlies the Google ranking scheme. So that's in terms of teaching. In terms of research, we just bought ourselves a pretty cool toy. We named it the Transfer Cluster as a nod to Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. So this cluster is owned and operated by the Computational Linguistics and Information Processing Lab, which is a laboratory in the Institute for Advanced Computer Studies. This lab draws faculty and students from the iSchool, computer science, linguistics, and business, where they are literally inventing the future of big data. So I've told you about what we're doing, teaching the students, present students about big data, and literally inventing the future of big data. And speaking of future, I'll now return it over to Jen.
So I bring my slides up when I talk about the stuff I'm going to talk about. I like to ask how many people have Facebook accounts? How many people have Facebook? That's more than I expected. When I talk to the FBI, there's like one dude in usually it's a lot. Okay, so I study social media, and going forward, I see a lot of kind of scary things in this space. But if you're not one of those people with a Facebook account, you don't get to get off thinking you're safe, because you are producing all the kinds of big data that Jimmy was just talking about. We produce it through certainly social media posts, but we produce it through our shopping habits. Anytime we use a credit card, anytime we drive our car past a place that there's a camera because it can recognize your license plate, right? You are being tracked all the time when you're outside your house, and sometimes you're being tracked inside your house. So we're producing all of this big data. And when we prepared for this panel, Doug told us he was going to talk about microcomputers. So, that part of the past you don't have to fill in. But if you pretend Doug talked about microcomputers, we've got this computing power. We have all this data that Jimmy's talking about that we're learning to handle. And I want to draw on a point that Doug brought up about having these technologies that can be used for very good or potentially evil purposes, and think about what's going to happen with that. So, how many of you are worried about the privacy of your information? Like, you don't want us finding stuff out about you. I mean, yeah, and there's creepy stuff we can find out about you. And this is what my research is on. I do the creepy stuff to find stuff out about you. So, in our lab, we've used social media posts and other data to predict your personality traits, your political preferences. We analyzed Twitter and had 97% accurate guesses about who people voted for in the last election. There are other researchers working in this space, and they can find out what your risk is of developing postpartum depression if you're pregnant, what your risk is of heart disease, if you use drugs, if you use alcohol, if you smoke, if you work well in teams, if you are likely to stay at your current job for more than 3 years, and on and on and on. Now, some of those may be things that you want to keep private, and some of them are even easier to predict. Sexual orientation, gender, religion, which also may be things you want to keep private depending on what country you're in, or even what company you work for in the US. So say that you want to keep your intelligence level private. And I think all of us have probably had this moment. I have this moment all the time where I'm like, I am nowhere near as smart as they think I am. I hope none of them find this out. Right? I like to keep my intelligence level private. What do I have to do to make sure that these creepy things that we're building can't figure out how smart I am? Well, there's this beautiful study that came out of the University of Cambridge that I love to talk about. They analyzed what people liked on Facebook. That's the only thing they looked at, what you like. And they could predict that big long list of stuff that I talked about, and they also predicted intelligence with very high accuracy. And in their paper, they listed the 4 things that were the strongest indicators of high intelligence, the 4 likes. So you can tell me if these make sense. Science. So you can say, sure, like smart people like science. Thunderstorms. It's kind of a geeky thing, maybe. The Colbert Report, Comedy Central. And number 4, one of the top 4 predictors of high intelligence was liking the page for curly fries. This is where I tell everybody, this is not my research, but the top predictor for low intelligence, the the strongest predictor for low intelligence was liking the Facebook page, I love being a mom. This is where the moms, yeah, I get that kind of low rumble from the mothers in the room. It's not my research, right? So I can give you, there's a lot of really interesting intersections of sociology and computer science and actually epidemiology, how diseases spread, that can explain why liking a page for curly fries makes you look smart. It has nothing to do with the content. It's basically that as a result of a lot of interesting things that happen in the network, smart people have happened to like that page, so if you come along and like it, their attributes get reflected back on you. But the lesson to take from that is that you can't hide from these algorithms, because if you want to cloak your intelligence level, you're never going to think, well, I just won't like that curly fries page. Okay, so a better example of this, all right, if you see this picture and know the story, you know that you know the story. How many people know the story? So this was an article, it was in the New York Times a couple of years ago. This dad in Minnesota calls his local Target manager on a rampage. You sent my 15-year-old daughter this flyer with coupons for diapers and baby bottles and cribs. Are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant? I can't believe you would do this. And the manager had no idea what he's talking about, because those flyers come from Target headquarters, but he apologizes. And in major customer service points for Target, he calls the dad back 2 weeks later to make sure everything's okay. And the dad says, you know, I owe you an apology because it turns out my daughter was pregnant, but Target figured it out before she told us. So how does Target, now this doesn't use social media at all, how does Target figure this out? Target computes something called a pregnancy score for every woman who shops there by using their purchase histories. And not only can they tell if you're pregnant, they can tell when your due date is. Because it's really easy to tell when someone has a baby by looking at what they buy, right? So you just go back 8 or 9 months and you look at what are the things that indicate someone's pregnant. The things that indicate that you're pregnant, top scores for Target, buying an extra bottle of vitamins, buying a handbag that's big enough to double as a diaper bag, so not an actual diaper bag, just a big purse, brightly colored rugs. But if you're in Target, behind some lady with vitamins, a purse, and a blue rug, you don't go, totally pregnant, right? And this is a great story, but it also shows that these algorithms have power to do things that we as humans don't understand. And so much of our data is out there that that's concerning, because it means we can't stop doing things that would reveal stuff about us. In addition to that, there's all kinds of other secrets there that are being revealed. One, these technologies actually influence the way we behave. So Facebook did a very controversial study last summer where they showed some people just happy posts or neutral posts from their friends, and they showed other people just sad posts or neutral posts from their friends. And they found that they could actually change the way people felt and change the sorts of things they said. If you just saw sad stuff, you got more sad. So they were able to manipulate your emotions. There's the algorithms that can predict the future. There's a study out of Cornell that tried to predict who your significant other was. And they found out when their algorithm was wrong, there was a 50% increased chance that you were going to break up. So they can kind of tell you if your relationship is doomed to fail. So these algorithms are finding out all kinds of things. What I really want to do is show you this video. So this is some sophisticated technology, right? And we can say, well, but I don't share a lot of this, right? And so, how many of you have seen this video? You would know it again from this screenshot. So this video came out a couple years ago. You can all actually make one of these videos for yourself. It's called Take This Lollipop, and if you Google that, you'll find their website. And it's this sort of interactive film that uses data from your Facebook profile. And when it came out, I was like, I'm not even gonna bother, because I have the world's strongest Facebook privacy settings, right? Nobody can see anything I post. There's 30 friends that can see what I post. I have every privacy option checked. But it got a lot of buzz, and after a couple weeks, I was like, you know what, I'll just go to kind of see what it does. And this is a recording of the video it made for me. So this is just 1.5 minutes. I'm going to talk you through it since you won't recognize everything on my profile. So it starts off where I click this Connect with Facebook button, and then it starts generating this video, and there's sound that goes with it. nothing, right? If I can't understand how my data is being shared, like literally no one in the world can be expected to know how their data is being shared. So there's a two-part problem here. One is that we have these very powerful computing techniques that can run over this big data that we can't really understand. But also it's very hard for us to understand what information is out there about us. And the more you go look, the more astonishing it is what can be done. So this kind of pushes us into is this technology being used for good or evil? Because, I sometimes say I feel like I'm working on a modern version of the Manhattan Project, which on one hand sounds like a little bit of hyperbole. On the other hand, imagine all these things that I said we can find out about you. Your religion, your drug use, your health history. Say that I start a company where I start selling that to like health insurance companies so they can decide whether or not they're going to cover you or what your rates will be. Or to companies that want to hire you, and it's just part of what's considered for your employment. That's not good, right? We have a hard enough time with credit bureaus, and they've got some accountability, and this has no accountability. And I've been talking about these sorts of technologies for a while, and I get emails every week from people who want to use this. I've had Major League Baseball teams contact me because they want to screen their pitchers to see how well they'll work on the team. I've had people working with credit bureaus talk to me because they want some of this to go into your credit report. It's a really terrifying potential future. At the same time, a lot of these technologies can be used to make our lives better. Right? If I can tell that you're at risk for postpartum depression because of the way that your tweets are evolving over the course of your pregnancy, it would be great if your doctor can kind of intervene and check on you because of that. So I think going forward, the challenge with this is not actually a technological challenge. We have this technology and it's coming, and all of these things will be commercially available in 5 years. The question is one of how do we want to handle our information? What are the policies that control who owns our data? Who's allowed to access it, what they can use it for, what are they allowed to do with it, and when do they have to be responsive to our requests? Those policies are very bad now, especially in the US, and no one has really thought about it. So going forward, it's actually a problem of managing and thinking about information and how it should be used. And it's not the computer scientists, thank God, who are going to solve that problem, right? It's people like, and I say that as a computer scientist, it's people coming from iSchools who understand information and people and how the technology works with that, who are going to figure out how we can use these technologies for good and stop them from being used in some of these horrible ways. So Doug insisted I put this slide at the end to kind of tie us back together. Doug, I don't know if you want to come up and finish or if we should wrap it with that. Yep. Okay, so for our panel, and especially Doug in his costume, thanks, I know we ran you over a little bit, but it was